Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Dave Tyson on Executive Cybersecurity. This is a new series Apollo Information System is kicking off to help executives navigate cybersecurity problems. I'm here with Dave Tyson, President and Chief Security Officer of Apollo Information Systems and co-chair of the Cybersecurity Initiative for the Private Directors Association. Thanks for coming, Dave. How are you?
I'm well, and thanks for having me, Mark.
That's great. Well, today we're going to talk about the perils executives and board members face when trying to find the right cybersecurity advisor, which is, of course, a big topic that we need to unpack. So let's look at it a little closer. Board members, executives, they know they need a solution and they know that they need help on cybersecurity, but they don't know what they don't know. How do they make the right choice? How do they make the right call? How do they avoid the pitfalls? And what should they look for?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think that first we start from the point of view that security doesn't ever stand still, and all of the surveys out there have said that board members and senior executives find cybersecurity to be a big issue for them. And certainly when you look at the risks, and both for the organization and for themselves as from a liability standpoint, they continue to evolve. So and it's not a simple topic, right? It's filled with complexity and changing business uh, uh, requirements, and on top of that, there's a lot of technology speak, which makes it difficult for people to access and really process it when you're trying to govern that kind of risk. And so I hope from this series that we're able to get to a place where we demystify some of the issues and make the subject a lot easier for executives to handle.
Can you give us a bit of insight on how the industry is working? I mean, what is it that they're doing that's failing executives in this space?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points. First off, that understanding that risk is not really well explained when it comes to cyber, because executives are generally pretty good at understanding risk. But when you look at cyber risk, it tends to be very dynamic. We call it asymmetric risk, where the outcome is obviously a lot bigger than the potential initial risk. And so understanding that it's dynamic, it has to be dealt with on a regular basis, then even a small incident can turn into a very large headache for organizations, is somewhat of a new concept in risk management, even in the last 10 years. And so I think that part of what I like to refer to as the noise of the industry, with all of the stakeholders who have an opinion, is built off of whatever their stake in the industry is. So there's regulators, and there are standards bodies, and there are consultants and product manufacturers, and many others, even government. And so many of the messages that they send are complex and filled with a lot of buzzwords or other words designed to make it difficult to really know how to put it together in context. And without a enterprise security strategy that's developed by somebody who understands all of this, it makes it difficult. It also leads to increased spend, reduced efficiency and effectiveness, and I think a general sense of frustration by executives that why is this so hard? And at the end of the day, I think that by getting the right advisor who really understands it in context of the business, and I call it ruthless focus on the business, I think that's the beginning of a start for executives to really begin to understand, govern the risk, and help their leadership teams manage it effectively.
Yeah, you said that there's a lot of noise out there in the industry that the executives need to filter through, and I imagine that there's some uncertainty as to what is real and what isn't, and what they should be listening to and what they shouldn't. Can you unpack that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that the requirements over the last 10 or 15 years to rely on compliance regimes have driven us to purchase products. And products are kind of a point in time solution, and they can be put in well, or they can be put in poorly, or anywhere in between. And a product might meet a certain threshold of usefulness, but that doesn't in itself secure the organization. If you look at every company that's been hacked, they all, in most cases, they had the latest and greatest tools, and they were compliant with the latest regimes, but they still got hacked. And why is that? Well, maybe the products were put in poorly, or, it's really not about how much you spend as an organization. It's about ensuring they have the right strategy with the right advice, and it's both, implemented and put in and managed well, for the threats that face your specific organization. And again, when the 3,000 or so manufacturers, in the United States alone, are coming at you with messages all the time, products are high quality, but is it right for you? And that's what you've got to, your team has to figure out.
I hear you talk about making an actual strategy on cybersecurity, and I hear about trying to look at what in particular you need to address in your individual organization. I'm not hearing a lot about budget. What can you say about that?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that when you're dealing with these asymmetric risks, that starting out with let's say, here's how much money, because traditional budgeting has always been very linear and very uniform. And understanding that risk changes in asymmetric, this type of asymmetric risk on a day-to-day basis, sometimes an hour-by-hour basis. Looking at it through the same lens, is going to give you suboptimal outcomes. Really, what you want to be able to do is say, what's the risk that faces me at any moment in time? How much risk am I prepared to accept as an organization? And does my spend or my effort, because not everything is about money in this case, is the program that I put in, is my strategy effective, for reducing the risk to my tolerance level? And when you think about it in terms of what you put effort into versus, how much, that's where the process of prioritization begins. But it's really critical to understand that if you say, hey, we're not gonna mitigate this risk because we don't have budget, then you are by default accepting the risk. And that's okay, as long as you're prepared to accept the risk as an organization. If you're not, then saying it's a budget issue is probably not going to get you to a productive place.
Well, speaking of being productive, let's talk about the board a bit. What is the role of the board in all of this?
And the Private Directors Association has done a ton of research in this space, and I think that take building on what they've produced. I think there's a couple of really key points. One, the board has a role to play in governing cybersecurity, both regulatory or maybe just guidance, which is really what the board is about, but also in using that wisdom to be able to, of all the problems they've seen in the past, to say how much risk is okay and what's our role, compared to, say, the CEO and the management team. And I think often they tend to meld together, but organizations approach this differently. In some organizations, it's a financial target. Hey, any risk over $50 million, we've got to manage that at the board level. It's got to be a committee for that. Or in other organizations, it's any risk that impacts our name's reputation, our family business, or something of that nature. It's an issue. The key is to define what's right for you as an organization. Set the boundaries and make sure everybody understands their role and responsibility. What are the metrics the board's going to expect? How do you change the report to the board so that it's both bringing you the information you need in a transparent way and getting it in a language that's easy to understand? Often what we see is there tends to be presentations about the technology or the current projects instead of how are we making the business more effective? How are we growing business by reducing cyber risk? How can we use this as a strategic competitive advantage in our business line against our competitors? And how do we secure both our supply chains, our intellectual property lines, so that we maximize the revenue for all the hard work that we're going through?
That's great. I think we learned a lot today about how to navigate these waters, and there's a lot more to talk about. So we're going to continue this series and try to bring in some more topics that are relevant to executives as they deal with cybersecurity needs of their organization. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks, Dave, for joining us and enlightening us on some of these finer points.
Great, Mark. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Well, join us on the next episode of the series. We will be examining some easy steps that business leaders can do to cultivate their own cybersecurity expertise and do it in a way that actually works. Apollo Information Systems expert senior leaders are experienced global CISOs who can help you develop your own customized program and create a competitive business advantage through great cybersecurity. Send a message to your customers that you are serious about protecting your firm and their information. Check us out at apollo-is.com. PDA provides information, education, and training on how boards and executive leadership can enhance understanding of cybersecurity governance, and much more. Check PDA out at privatedirectorsassociation.org.